We're preparing to go on YouTube, so just give me a minute. All right, with that, I am going to pass it on to Washika Torres from UIC, and I'll let you take it from here. Washika, thank you so much for submitting a proposal, and happy for the session, and happy for you to be here. Thank you.
Hi, thanks so much. Thanks for choosing me. I got this recommendation and I was like, this is right up my alley. I'm really interested in food justice, especially from a disability rights angle. And I was actually speaking to a few people last night and realized I've been doing disability justice work for about 13 years now, since 2008 when I was an undergrad, forever ago. But I've actually been doing this for about 13 years, different areas of advocacy, legislation, lobbying, cross-cultural analysis of disability rights, things like that. And so I'm really glad to be able to bring this perspective to the conference. And I really hope that a lot of people can take away from it and we can engage, now or later. And I hope, that you see the value of the work that I've been doing and the project I've been developing for about 2 years now. COVID really kind of hit it hard, but I'm still trying to work on it. So here we go. I don't have any sound to share, so it'll just be me speaking. So let me open up the PowerPoint. Here we go. I actually chose these oranges on purpose. I really thought it kind of went in with the theme. So my name is Washika Torres, and I'm going to be talking to you about creating an accessible food sovereignty guide for the Chicagoland area. So I always like to start off with an agenda to keep me on track, to let others see kind of what I'm going to be doing, to see, oh, well, I have questions about this or that particular thing. I will explain like the acronyms as we go, don't worry. And so we will start with an introduction, who I am, thought exercise, some terms I want people to think about, food sovereignty and people with disabilities together, SILs, which I'll tell you what those are. And then we'll kind of get into the guide, what's going to be in the guide, how people can contribute to it, access questions to think about, for people to take away from, and then a rough draft. I'll show you a rough draft of the first edition. Quite rough, but still very proud of it. So we're going to start with me. So my name is Washika Tanika Torres. I am now a third-year PhD student at the University of Illinois, Chicago in disability studies. It's kind of one of the few kind of standalone disability studies programs in the US. It's not connected to like an English department, women gender studies. It's very much its own thing. And so it's really interdisciplinary. So it does allow me to look at different angles of disability lenses. So there's like the medical model and there's the social model. And I've been able to combine that work with other fields, such as food studies, which is also a relatively new field. So disability studies comes from sociology. A lot of the founders were sociologists. And food studies kind of comes from anthropology. A lot of people in food studies, they have an anthropology background. And food studies looks at meaning and things like that for different groups of people and how they navigate food systems. I'm also a documentarian. I actually filmed a documentary in the summer of 2017, sorry. Oh, it was a while ago too, in Mississippi, looking at and trying to map kind of what are disabled people eating, how are they navigating the food system. It was mostly in Jackson. There are people with different types of disabilities, how are their homes set up, and you really like, how does that system work for them? I'm also an activist. I've been a disability rights activist for, like I said, about 13 years now, which is pretty exciting. I've also written a number of grants. I actually wrote a grant that was approved to film the documentary. I've written a number of, smaller grants for different projects related to disability and, access and equity. I also own a business. I own more than one, but I also own a business, which is kind of hard to manage when you're a grad student. So sometimes things, you have to prioritize and reprioritize those things. But that's a bit about me and kind of my frame of reference. And so I wanted to start with this thought exercise. And this is more rhetorical, but I do want you to think about it and reflect on it. So, who is in your community? Who are the members who make up a community, your community? So, when you think of community, who do you think about? Who are we thinking about when we're thinking about these decisions that need to be made, or who's my neighbor, or that kind of thing, right? Do you think about disabled people? There are some people who have disabilities that are visible. There are some people with disabilities who aren't visible. Do we think about them when we're thinking about the roads, the streets? The winters in Chicago are harsh. A lot of people have to go into the street. There's a walkability guide for the winter, and it's not good in poorer areas. Things are not as shoveled or as paved, roads aren't fixed as quickly. And for someone who's able-bodied, they may be able to navigate those things, but someone who's not, they're not going to. When city planning is done, are there curb cuts? Are, those curb cuts actually made properly? There are a lot that aren't. When it comes time to repave streets and potholes and things like that, who are we thinking about? Do you think about homeless people? Do you think homeless people are part of your community? Just because they don't have houses or they don't live in apartments, does that mean that they're not part of the community? They live there. A lot of people who are homeless work, so they work there. They may have families, things like that. Do we think about them when we're thinking about, oh, this is my community? It's maybe a little controversial. Do we think about sex workers? Either those who work in the community doing sex work, or those who, live in the community, maybe do sex work somewhere else. Do we think about those when we're thinking about decisions that are being made in terms of the community? We think about them. There's different types of sex work too. That's another thing to think about. Some people just think there's like one or two types. There's many types. So are we thinking about this range of experiences these people have and the questions or concerns they may have about the community? What about addicts? Right? What about them? There are people who are functioning and people who are not very well functioning in terms of addiction and needing help and needing resources, right? Are we thinking about them when we think about community, sharing of resources, gathering of resources, information, that kind of thing too. So, these people are part of your community. That's my statement, right? That's not, to me, that's not a negotiable thing as to are they, aren't they? They are. Right? Their voices have value. You know what I mean? Are we making a community that's, for instance, safe for people who have addiction to seek help? Are we creating centers that help them? Are they accessible? Are they no judgment? So people who may be doing sex work who want to get out of it, but they do it to support their addiction, how are we creating a place that is not going to judge them? What about homeless people? Are we creating a space where they can get the resources they need to maybe, get out of homelessness, to be members of a community in a home rather than outside of the home? And disabled people, are we making things accessible for them? Are they able to access those services in a way that is comfortable and not stigmatizing to them? So that's something I kind of want you to think about. Who is your community? And when you do things that involve the community's voice and you want to hear the voice, do you include these people? Do you think about them? Do you work with them or against them? Thinking about that adversarial relationship too. So there are a few terms which I just shortened these because, of the nature of the conference. I don't have to go deeply into each of them. But for some people who don't know, just kind of shorthand, so food sovereignty is basically the right of people to determine the extent to which they want to be self-reliant. They can determine their own, food that's accessible and equitable and right for them, like culturally appropriate, which means different things to different people. So maybe you're Indigenous, maybe you're an African American, maybe you are disabled and you need groceries that are pre-cut. Right, I showed you that bowl of oranges. Maybe they need them that are pre-peeled so that they can actually eat them by themselves and not have someone at their house to assist them. Maybe they need foods that are nutritious, but they're ready-made. Maybe they need something like HelloFresh or something like that, but that is affordable because they're on a budget. Maybe we need to rethink these foods as not convenient foods that we can kind of charge at a luxury, but people need these as a necessity as opposed to eating frozen pre-cut food or canned pre-cut food, which is not as nutritionally sound. And that's not what people want to eat. That's not something they feel that they should have to resort to eating. So food justice, the food justice movement does seek to address these injustices that disproportionately impact people based generally on race and class. There's actually an article or a chapter by Natasha Simpson about how the food justice movement, whether advertently or inadvertently, leaves out disabled people from the start. For the same reasons that a lot of movements leave out disabled people, which is ableism, discrimination against people with disabilities. And so, the idea of infantilizing disabled people, disabled people don't cook, disabled people do or don't do this, making these assumptions about the community without actually asking and involving the community. And so there's a history of that. And I like to think of food sovereignty as the destination and food justice as like the journey, if that kind of helps. And so foodways are kind of the eating habits, culinary practices of a people, a region, or historical period. So for me, I actually am mapping disabled foodways. So how do disabled people navigate the food system based on region, based on disability, based on their past cultural practices? Because a disabled person, that is not their all-encompassing identity. Disabled people often have other identities that also mean something to them besides their disabled identity. And there are some people who feel like their disabled identity does not define them in any way, and they prefer to just have their cultural, like racial or class identity. But yeah, so both of these kind of movements often leave people with disabilities out of the conversation. But what we're doing is we're centering them now, right? And we're looking at disability. So I put a yay and I put a little smiley face to kind of signify that, the great thing about a lot of these movements now is that we are beginning to center people who are traditionally marginalized from the system. And we are doing it from within these groups rather than outside of the groups. So this is why like food sovereignty and food justice is difficult when we're talking about people with disabilities / disabled people. I use both terms interchangeably. Where I'm from on the East Coast, we generally only did people with disabilities. That was the term we used and that was it. And then when I moved to the Midwest, people use both terms interchangeably because some people prefer person first language, which is people with disabilities, and some people prefer identity first language, which is disabled people. And that's another thing you should ask. Don't make the assumption, as I did when I first moved here, that one was insulting or one was stigmatizing, right? Because there's nothing wrong with having a disability. The error or the issue comes from how society treats disabled people, right? So don't assume that, oh, well, this person is disabled, oh, how sad. No, recognize that it's not their impairment or something like that that is hindering them from enjoying their life to the fullest. It is society. And so part of this is media assumptions about how people with disabilities eat. For instance, how many movies or TV shows have you seen people with disabilities eating? Not just being fed like in hospital beds or someone else is cooking for them. They're actually there sitting down at a table with their family, eating a full meal as an equal member of the family. There's a very few times when you see that happen. There's also misunderstanding needs as luxuries. I mentioned the pre-cut fruit, vegetables. Where I lived back home, pre-cut fruit and pre-cut meat are not that expensive. Meat, you can just go to the butcher, they'll cut it however you want. It's free. There's butcher shops in almost every supermarket where I lived. But I moved to the Midwest and I went to Kroger with a friend of mine, and she wanted a pineapple. They were on sale 2 for $4. I was like, okay, great, let's get this pineapple. She's like, I don't know how to cut pineapples. I've never cut a pineapple. I don't know how to cut a pineapple. I don't want to cut myself. And so she's like, let me just get this pre-cut pineapple. Half of one pre-cut pineapple was $4, meaning the equivalent was $8. And some people have that argument, oh, well, you have to think about the person who cut it in the packaging. The packaging is not that much more expensive. It's a thin container of plastic about this size, right? Those don't cost a lot. Making one more SKU number with a thin piece of paper, that doesn't cost a lot. And you're thinking, oh, well, what about the labor? The person who works there, who cuts the fruit, it's not a special person. It's whoever works in that department. So the amount of money that goes into it is fairly nominal, but it's charged as a luxury. It's people are not thinking a disabled person who needs this will buy this. They are thinking someone is either quote unquote lazy or they're in a rush and we're charging them for the convenience, right? But that's not with all food. So like sliced apples are not way more expensive than whole apples, because people are thinking, oh, well, moms and kids need them, things like that. So we do pick and choose a lot with fresh foods, what's a need, what's a luxury. And oftentimes people with disabilities, then they'll have to go to the freezer section to get pre-cut stuff, or they'll have to go to, get canned food. And it's not just about the nutrition of it all. It's about the want and needs, right? They want to be able to access food the same way other people can. They want the foods that they need, fruits, vegetables, meat, to not be taxed as a luxury because they need it in a different form, even though it's not costing the supermarket that much. It's the perception of who is a consumer. And they are perceiving the consumer as an able-bodied person, right? Who could do this, but won't. So a lot of people with disabilities / disabled people don't have a lot of political power, right? A lot of people with disabilities have been put in institutions. Their capacities have been, or their capacities have been portrayed as already diminished from the time they're born, or once they become disabled, all of a sudden, all of their faculties and capacities are diminished. There are a lot of things that actually prevent disabled people, like for instance, from voting. If you have, for instance, dementia, you are still allowed to vote, but people are not always going to nursing homes to make sure people are registered or to make sure people can vote. So that really diminishes the political power of disabled people. Or when you get to a voting place, it may not be accessible, or they may not have the materials you need. Maybe you need large print or braille or something like that. Services aren't always comprehensive. There are a lot, disabled people, it's not that they have a lot of needs, but they have needs that are just not being met by the current system. Legislation and city planning, we talked about that a moment ago, not made with the people with disabilities in mind. I mean, snow removal, it's not just snow removal, but when you're planning a city and you're not planning for disabled people, different types, not just someone in a motorized chair, not just someone in a manual chair, not just someone with a cane or a walker, but all kinds of disabled people, then you're not planning for the entire community. You're planning for who you think the community should be. I want you to think about that again. You're planning for the community that you think should be there. And this extends beyond just the legislative. It extends into grocery stores. It extends into community gardens. It extends into parks. If you're making things that aren't accessible, you're not thinking disabled people will exist in that space or currently exist in that space. So, not sure why this didn't. Here we go. So CILS, that is what the acronym is, Center for Independent Living, or Centers for Independent Living. So CILS, this is where there is so much opportunity for people who want to do justice work, all kinds of justice work to go to. So a CIL, or a Center for Independent Living, has a long history in the United States, like since around like 60s, 70s. Generally, they're designed and operated by people with disabilities themselves. And that is huge in terms of autonomy and sovereignty and how things are gone and where money goes and how it's spent. So they generally provide independent living services for people with disabilities, all types of disabilities. And they help keep people in communities. That's the biggest thing. They help keep people in communities or get them out of institutions they don't want to be in. There's huge campaigns. There's about a 20-year grant that I actually was working on with a professor of mine to get people out of nursing homes. You know, there is and I'm not going to go too deep into it because that's not the kind of the talk, but there are huge kind of pipelines to get people into nursing homes, even though they don't want to be there, and it's more expensive to have them in a nursing home than to have them live in the community. So if you look at the Olmstead Act, that's one big act. There's other acts about keeping people in communities, and Centers for Independent Living, that is one of their main goals. They help you find services, they help fight for your services, they have legal, housing, other types of access. They do legislative stuff, they go to the Capitol, they have budgets, things like that. So the two kind of most well-known ones in the Chicago area are Access Living and the Progress Center for Independent Living. So I will be giving this slide over, this PowerPoint over, and you can, if you don't remember those names, you can go back to this PowerPoint and you can actually look for those places and you can see what activities they're doing. A lot of things are digital now, obviously, but you can see what they're doing. They have meetings for a whole bunch of different things. And I have primarily worked with Access Living to help do this guide. And so, but I have a professor who also knows someone at the Progress Center for Independent Living to kind of keep the work going. So we finally get to it. What is the Chicagoland Food Sovereignty Guide? So it is a food sovereignty guide that focuses on access, right? That will not only help people with disabilities learn about their food access options, right? But it will help create a dialogue with markets to increase various forms of access for people with disabilities, for what people with disabilities need in order to have a barrier-free experience. And a barrier-free experience means different things to different people. So I have a friend who is autistic and shops with glasses on and headphones or shades, I should say, because sometimes stores are too bright, they're really loud, there's a lot going on, and that's really distracting, and it's a sensory overload for them. And so some stores have developed sensory hours where people can just shop and it's fine, and they feel more relaxed and they have a better time. They're not worried about their sensory overload. They can now shop in relative peace. With the onset of COVID, a lot of people who are older and immunocompromised, there's hours where they're like, we've cleaned the store overnight up and down. So now there are times you can go shop and you won't worry as much about getting sick. And so there are stores, they have there's small or large changes they have made to ensure that people with different types of disabilities will have a more equitable experience. So, right, okay, there we go. So what's in the guide? Information about Chicago, right? Information about the people who contribute, and they provide their different perspectives on access issues. You'll see some of them because I will actually show you a very rough draft of the guide, like I said. Questions you can ask at stores to assess access needs. So there's something in there already built in for you to kind of go, okay, I didn't think about this. I didn't think about that. How does this look? Where does this go? Is this wide enough? Is this too tall, too short? Different types of definitions, more information. So based on what the contributors here say, we kind of I've looked into more information about the topics that were discussed. So one person was talking about gardens. So I looked more, you look more into that. Some people are talking about attitudes. You look more into that. Information on link and link match. So link is, Illinois, the name of their EBT SNAP program. Link match Some of you may or may not know what link match is, but it is a grant kind of thing, or as I understand it, I have it in the guide. You can apply and they can kind of match your link dollars, so it kind of goes further. There are some places like, for instance, farmers markets and the Dill Pickle Co-op, which is north of me, they do link match up to a certain amount of money. So instead of like maybe you have 25, you spend 25, you get 25, right, in link match. So again, your money goes further. And contributor profiles. This was extremely important to me. I wanted to make sure everyone who contributed to this guide was recognized. Every person in the guide who has given me information or has helped me, I want to recognize they are all contributors to this. This is not just my thing. I'm putting it together, but this is theirs. This is the community's, right? I do not own the words or the ideas of the disabled participants who participate. And you don't necessarily have to be disabled to participate. There are places where you can kind of, you can just like, oh, this I know is not accessible because I've read the questions in the guide or the questions to ask the stores. And then based on that information, we can go, okay, well, let's go to the store. A lot of people have said this is an issue in this particular neighborhood. So let's go there. Let's ask them. Let's see what can be done, if anything can be done. And let's, work with the members of the community, not just do something for them, work with them to create a more equitable experience. So this is, and you'll see this too. This is how people would contribute to the guide. So they put their name, what neighborhood do you live in? If we're talking about neighborhoods, you may have a store with the same name in different neighborhoods. So are you in Ravenswood? Are you near the lake? Are you in Lawndale? Are you in Avondale, Humboldt Park? Where are you? Kind of disability that you have, especially the one that's being impacted the most by this inaccessible system, what type of store it is. Is it a supermarket? Is it a farmer's market? Is it another type of market? Is it a corner store? We call them bodegas back home, but apparently it's not called that here, so just corner store. There's a list of questions in the guide you can ask, or you can come up with ones yourselves. What access issues need to be addressed? Is the store too narrow, too loud, no customer service, bad customer service? Who is your alderman? Like, who are the city council representatives? Who are the people who know these stores, who zone them, who have this political kind of thing? You don't have to answer all these questions, obviously, but these are just some questions of how you can contribute to the guide itself. And so I leave you, before I show you the guide, I leave you with some access issues to think about. How do disabled people shop, or how do people with disabilities shop? How do people with different types of disabilities shop? Sometimes people have multiple disabilities at once. Something to think about. Do they need help? Do they want help? That's a big one. Some people will help without really considering, and they're patronizing people, and that's not what people want. Just like I said, with people with disabilities versus disabled people, how do people want to be addressed? Speak to people, interact with them, treat them as equals, because they are. What services are there to assist them? Are they reliable? Some stores say they have customer service to help. When you get there, there's nothing. And that's a waste of a trip. How are people getting to where they need to go? Is the route accessible? And what does that mean if it's not? What alternatives do they have? Good ones, bad ones? What choices do you have? People think, oh, we all have free choices. No, we have choices based on the things around us. So for instance, where I live, there is a market technically, but the food, they keep getting hit with health violations. So I'm not going to shop there if the food is not only not healthy, makes me sick. So that means I have to take 2 buses or a bus and a train to another neighborhood to make sure I get the food or the things I need to get. There's a market, a chain, a small chain, not going to name names because I don't want to get sued, and they consistently keep expired food on the shelves. They consistently have food that is just not good and they will just not, they won't remove it. They get hit with health violations, they pay the fine, and it happens again. So some people will say, well, technically that person doesn't live in a food desert because there's a market there, there's a supermarket there. What kind of supermarket? Is it accessible? Because another one that's close to me that I can walk half a mile and then take a bus to, they have gates, like a thick gate around it. If I am in any kind of manual chair, walker, anything, besides me walking through there, I can't get in. So what does that mean? Who did they plan that grocery store for? It definitely wasn't someone with certain types of disabilities. They weren't thought of, they weren't planned for. They didn't see them as customers or consumers or people who would spend money. So I want you to think about those things. That's some things I want you to take away from. So now we're going to look at the guide. I'm going to escape this, stop the share here, and then I will reshare. Again, rough draft, give you some grace. So here it is. This is what, I don't think I can make it bigger. Sure. Anyway. So this is it, the Chicagoland Accessibility Food Sovereignty Guide. That's me. Another thing, I use Comic Sans, and I do make a reference to this. Comic Sans is one of the few free fonts that people with dyslexia can read easily or easier because of the shape of it. So I do use Comic Sans intentionally. I know a lot of people have said things about Comic Sans, but it is one of the few like free ones that's just available on your computer. You don't have to download it or find it, but it is one of the few free ones. I was actually giving a talk and people were saying, oh, Comic Sans, haha. And I was like, well, actually, there may be some other ones, but I know Comic Sans is the most popular one I've heard talked about in the community. So here's the preface. There we go. This guide is a work of justice. Disability justice is centered, but it reflects, so see, Comic Sans. Examples include the font. The guide, even in its infancy, is ambitious. It aims to not only look at the Chicagoland area of over 10,000 square miles and over 9 million people, but it hopes to be a blueprint for other spaces to follow. It's a creative collaboration. Every person is contributing and will contribute, brings their own narrative, motivation, and talent. We hope this guide will be helpful, illuminating, and enjoyable. And I do truly hope that for the guide. Where's food sovereignty? Where do we all fit in? Food justice, food system, eco-ability, and the eco-ability movement. I have many things to say about this because there is a concept, or was, in the United States, that when first people came here, besides the indigenous people, that this was like virgin land, and that concept of virgin, untouched land, one is false, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But the other issue is that people don't want to kind of mess up the aesthetics of certain places to make them accessible. Oh, well, if we put a pathway, a flat pathway here, it'll ruin the ground of the experience. Let me tell you something. Indigenous people who have lived here since forever, they shaped the land for their needs. Right? The land had already been shaped for their needs. It wasn't in no way kind of this untouched, pristine kind of land, right? The indigenous people who came here or traded to the north and to the south of this country's borders were doing that. They were shaping the land for their needs. And so we need to think about that. How do we shape the land and the environment and the community for the needs of everyone in that community? So I want you to kind of remember that. And so the eco-ability movement looks at that. And it does center disabled people with looking at ecological problems and solutions. Disabled people are often blamed for certain things like straws. Straws make up, 4% of stuff in the ocean. A big issue is nets. Nets, a lot of people who fish just cut their nets, and then it just kind of goes into the ocean, or the ways in which recycling is or isn't being done. There was a report that found out that a lot of people who send the recyclables offshore, they're actually getting burned. Right? So let's think about that when we're thinking about, disabled people in straws. They need them. Get over it. Alternatives to plastic straws do not work for everyone. believe and trust that disabled people are experts of their own experiences. They know what works and doesn't work for them. So Chicago, diverse people, diversity, 77 neighborhoods. Blew my whole mind when I found out there were 77 neighborhoods. And so, yeah, recognizing that diverse needs and diverse solutions, there's no one size fits all city. That's why this is the Chicagoland guide specifically. And it has information about Chicago specifically. I didn't really get into the fire, the huge Chicago fire that did reshape a lot of the landscape in here. There may be some people who want to speak about that, but that's one of the few things that are here. I talked about Link Match, and Link Up Illinois. So Link Match was called the double value coupon program, but I guess coupon wasn't working for people. And it doubles the value of Link purchases at farmers markets, matching currency redeemable at the market for Link eligible foods. So not hot foods, obviously, but anything that you can use your Link, EBT, food stamps, whatever you want to call it. So combined with targeted outreach efforts, they dramatically increase Link purchases. So which was really hard for people. So when it shifted from stamps to electronic cards, it was kind of hard for people to kind of do that. Because I know when I was younger, if you spent a certain amount in food stamps, physical food stamps, I actually remember them, you did get a bonus. So like you spent $5, you got $3 back, or 10, you got 5. But a lot of that did disappear. So Link Match helps with that. Types of stores: supermarkets, farmers markets, food co-ops. You know, they have a plan, you want to hold them to that standard. Meat markets, local farms, community gardens. This is sometimes hard to do because some gardens are not in the most accessible places, but don't just think about access like ADA, capital A access. Sometimes access means what are the needs of the members in the community, and maybe those aren't ADA accessible compliant, but they are meeting the needs of disabled members in your community. Types of disabilities and why that matters. So we would want contributors to tell us that, but it will have a better understanding of how access needs are different for different disabilities. Like I said, there's no one size fits all model for disability and people with disabilities needs. Oftentimes, types of places want to do kind of this broad kind of work where it's like, okay, well, if we do this, then this will help these kinds of disabled people, and they're the greatest population of disabled people. So other people, let's not even focus on them. No, right? Because that's still not equitable. It's still not accessible. So we have mobility impairments, learning disabilities, blind and low vision, capital D deaf, which is different than lowercase deaf, psychiatric disabilities, mental illness, cognitive, developmental, bodily difference, which includes facial differences, things like that, autism, chronic illness, chronic fatigue, chronic pain, prefer not to answer, do not know, and also not a person with a disability, not disabled. You don't have to be disabled to contribute to the guide. You don't have to be disabled to want a more equitable society, just like you don't have to be Black to want an anti-racist society. You know, you don't have to be a woman to want a society that's equitable for women, right? So this guide is, while it does obviously center disabled people, you don't have to be disabled to want a supermarket to be more accessible, to be better for disabled people. So the main issues impacting disabled consumers, I did a number of interviews, and this was one of the things that people had said, or a few things that different people I'd interviewed or spoke to had said. I'd spent the summer of 2019, as I was creating this guide, giving talks to different groups of disabled people and asking them, you know, I'm talking to you, but I also want to know. I don't want to make assumptions. I want to know directly from you, what are the issues? And then here's one of the contributors. He talked about economic access barriers. Another contributor, Michelle Garcia, with Access Living, talked about another one, community gardens. That one was actually really great. There was another one, Abla Garib, and she talked about these different questions. She came up with some amazing questions. And then we have more questions because I had multiple conversations with people, and this is what they asked. So like three parts of questions. And like I said, how to contribute to the guide would be in there. There's me, and there's image descriptions. And then there was another person who also helped me inform the guide, image description. We didn't do an in-depth interview, but Nell helped to inform a lot of what I wrote. So in the guide, obviously. And then these would be more contributor profiles, right? References to kind of where this all comes from. More references. And yeah, so that is what the first rough draft of the guide will look like. I know we have some people in the chat who had questions, but there you go. That's the long and short of it. I'm going to actually go to the chat now because I can see it. Let's see.
Did you see the question, Nikki? I think Nikki Jackson has a question.
Oh yeah, I'm looking. Yeah, I'm actually looking through the comments. I'm sorry, I was looking through the comments because I didn't know if everyone had their comments out loud. Oh my God, thank you so much. You're blowing my mind right now. Thank you. I mean, this is really community work, to be honest. I'm really glad that I can illuminate these things for people and talk about it as much as I can. But I'm really happy. How can we make stores realize that delivery is not a luxury for those with disabilities, especially during COVID? I think one of those things is to have campaigns of people. I know when COVID first started, the kind of leave at the door policy was not accessible. Because if I need you to deliver to my door, my actual door, not the door front to my apartment building, and you leave my bags on the street, then I need it delivered to my door. And a lot of people with disabilities have complained about those services. So now they have leave at the door as an option, but now they've changed that. So keep speaking to people, like keep speaking to those stores, keep speaking to people in your community too, right? Because generally, if a store is delivering to somewhere in your community, that means that they've seen the value in delivering to that community, in spending time packing up the groceries and sending it. So speak to members of your community, let them know that this is ridiculous, that this is not equitable for disabled people, and you have a right to the same type of access that other people have. I actually was talking about this with a friend of mine. Curbside services, or when I shop online, they say some things are only available for curbside pickup and they're not available to have delivered to your house. That's not equitable, because now I don't have the same access as someone with a car or as someone who can walk into the store. So that's something that I have been complaining about consistently. Like if I know, right? Because sometimes I don't drive. I don't drive. I've never driven. I can drive. Don't be on the road when I'm driving, but I don't drive. So if I can get a ride from someone, that's great. But you don't want to have to get a ride. I use the delivery service. I pay this money, and I don't have equitable access. So every time I see stuff that I'll see it's available in the store, but it's not available for delivery, I file a complaint every time. And I talk about it when I'm not on Facebook now, but when I would talk about it there. Let's talk about it. Let's get people together. Let's talk to these stores. So, so using social media works really well. So lots of campaigns I think would be work. So people are super excited. So I'm still working on the guide. So the guide itself, no. I am going to be, I mean, once the guide's done, the rough draft is done, I do want it to get it translated into different languages. I have not, I might just use the service and just pay out of pocket. It would just be easier on me than going out and going, hey, person who I might be underpaying accidentally. I'm always about paying people their worth. I'm always about paying people for their labor. So for me, I wouldn't want to like ask like a friend, right? And then I'm using up their labor and time they could be working on another project. So once the rough draft is done, I do just want to just pay people to translate it, especially into languages that are popular in Chicago, right? So you would have, it's already in English, Spanish, more likely Mandarin, Polish. I had another one in mind. Like I was thinking 5 languages, because when I see posters or like announcements for different things around the city, they're usually in a multitude of languages. So I kind of want to hit the major ones, especially. I'm trying to think of the other one. I cannot remember. I'm sorry, but that's what I want to do. No, I file a complaint either with corporate or with someone in the store, and I keep track of them. They do surveys all the time. How was your experience? Awful, because you're not giving me equitable access. Also, like I said, tagging them on social media. This is an interesting fact I learned about Twitter. Even if you don't tag a store on Twitter, they actually have someone still search for their name on Twitter. So say it was Target, and I say, oh man, Target. I don't at them, right? I say, oh, Target is ridiculous with this or that, or when I went, this happened, and Target will sometimes reply, oh, I'm sorry for your this bad service. Could you tell me more about what happened, right? And that starts a dialogue. And so that would be one way to do that, right? Or again, on Facebook, you have a complaint you file, you make it public, and you share it to different pages. You have your friends share it, and that has a swell storm. Signing a petition, right? Talking to the ACLU, talking to the Centers for Independent Living. They have access to like legal things, right? That I wouldn't have access to. So having those conversations with those organizations, and having a social media presence where you talk to or you address the company and address their ills, that would be really great. It's going to take a sip of this tea. Sorry. Were there any questions or comments from Huva? Okay, thank you, Claudia. Oh, not yet. Okay, well, I'm really glad people were interested. I'm glad people are excited. My email is in the PowerPoint. I'll be sending the PowerPoint. So if you want to contribute to the guide, or people who are interested, or groups, like I said, it is really hard now to connect with people continuously. I was like saying sustainably, continuously in the age of COVID. But I'm not in Chicago. Mm-hmm. I would say your next step could be the DOJ, but you could also reach out to the ACLU, Nikki, about your issue. That might be something you want to do. Also, the co-ops really are. This is a thing too. The co-ops are really dependent on the community, right? That's the whole point of the co-op. Like I'm a part of 2 co-ops, and they really do depend on the community to start and be sustained. And these co-ops generally have missions, right? Their missions are generally to create a better, more equitable, market system. So you call them out. You're not creating a better, more equitable market system if you, for instance, have a lack of screen reader friendliness when it comes to emails or websites. You're not creating an equitable experience. And there are generally rules about how apps are supposed to be, and they're not hard to make accessible. There are guides on how to make them accessible too. So perhaps you can say, here's a solution I found online to how to make the app or your emails or your website more accessible, right? It's not just saying, this is more accessible, fix it, but this is more accessible, and I'm giving you the tools to fix it. I am telling you how to, then yeah, definitely go to you can say legal services, or you can find a Center for Independent Living in your city. They're not just in Chicago, they're all over the country. So Center for Independent Living is just the title of what the centers are and what they do, but the actual names of the centers are different. So you can look online for Centers for Independent Living in my county or my city or something like that, and they can also direct you to services too, because some offer different services. So some may have more robust housing services, some may have more robust legal services. Like I said, Access Living has an initiative they've been doing for 20 years to get people out of nursing homes. So they definitely have a lot of services about that. They have a group that meets, or that met every other week or every week, and I attended some of those. So definitely do that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, some people don't, and the thing is, some people don't know what all centers for independent living do, sometimes because they do different things. But I would say just check them out. You never know. They have so many, like I said, there's so many different services. I know Access Living has like so many different meetings. There's one for Latinos with disabilities. There's, like I said, one for people who want to get out of nursing homes. There's a cross disability support group. There's like a youth-based disability group there as well. So yeah, lots of services. A lot of places offer a lot of services, a lot of actions that they do. But I will say, I've been considering I've been working on this project for 2 years. I feel like y'all encouragement for all of you has just been great, because it is difficult to keep going, especially in the age of COVID. It is sometimes difficult with all the other community things or all the other issues that have popped up. But I will say that this is still, an issue. Access to markets is still an issue. These markets, like, there are some disabled people who do not want to use online services. They either don't trust them or they can't navigate them, kind of like with Nikki. But oh, 1 second. But if people want to have different ways to shop and access food, then those ways should be equitable. What brought me to this project? I don't know if you all saw the story of the pre-peeled oranges at Whole Foods. It was like a story, and then someone who, I forgot what her role was, she complained, oh, only nature had a way to cover these oranges. They were actually sumo mandarins, but whatever. And so Whole Foods took it off the shelves. And this was years ago, so maybe 2015, 2016. And then there was a backlash. Disabled people said, I'm not gonna call someone to peel the orange for me. I want to be able to access this myself. And they're like, oh, but Whole Foods is so expensive. They're like, yes, expensive. Do I like the expense? Of course not. But I need this, right? I need something like this, or I'm gonna have unhealthy alternatives, right? So the conversation shouldn't be about whether this is a luxury or a need. It should be about how affordable it is or isn't. And it hit me, it was resonating with me. And then when I went to the store with the pineapples, I was like, this is ridiculous. This is inaccessible. This price is inaccessible to so many people. I just want a pineapple. Actually, we wound up not even getting that pineapple. I actually told my friend, I will cut this pineapple for you. I know how to cut a pineapple. I will cut this pineapple for you. There's no way you're paying $4 for half of one pineapple. And I really, like, as someone who does work with food and who does work with packaging, I really was like, there's no way. There's nothing that justifies this cost. And I thought, again, back to where I lived back home. I'm from the South Bronx, and there's a lot of supermarkets near me, thankfully. And there was no way this was priced. So say if pineapple was like $2 a pound, right, whole, and they just weighed it, which they normally just do it by the item, but just an example, cut pineapple maybe $2.50 a pound. Meat, like I said, is not going to be a upcharge, because you just go to the butcher, they cut it for free, you take it. And that's something that my parents did. My mother would buy, like, we would buy meat, and then we would say, okay, well, this is a huge roast. I want steaks. I want chops this way. I want this to be cube steak. I want this to be cut up this way. And it's fine. It's all done. Thank you. And then I go. But so that kind of led me down a rabbit hole of, okay, well, how are people navigating the system? How are disabled people navigating the system? And I read more and more blogs, and that, again, listening to disabled people themselves is how I started this particular route, just like how I started advocacy work, listening to the stories that people, weren't listening to or weren't hearing, and they were in these kind of corners and silos of the internet, and like really thinking about them and centering them in my work. What kind of resources and support can advocacy organizations in the food system provide as it relates to your guide, or as it relates to helping people access food? I'm glad you asked. Well, you, again, can partner with SILs. You can ask members within the SILs, what are the needs in their neighborhoods? When we're thinking about community gardens, a lot of people think about community gardens. again, disabled people are members of your community. So if you're building a garden, or if you're working on a garden, or you're trying to change a garden to make it more accessible, talking to people in the community with disabilities. There's actually something else I can show you. I have a friend who lives in Ravenwood. I can't tell you exactly where my friend lives. Like, that would be weird. And they did a rooftop garden. I'm trying to find the image. They did a rooftop garden, and they asked all the members in the building, okay, well, what do you want to see in this rooftop garden? What would make it, what changes do we need to make to ensure that you're going to use it? And so I will show you this. There's a lot of other photos I'm not going to show you, but please allow me to share my screen this one last time. So they actually came up with, I'll show you this, and wait, where's the other photo? There's two photos I wanted to show you, but this one was one of them, and it's just a really, really hot day. But they actually have these huge containers that can be moved around for, depending on what people need. And they have them, and they're not actually as tall as you think, but people who can access them, there's actually chairs around the patio area. So you can actually have this moved, and you can sit down in the chairs while you're planting or picking the fruits or vegetables off of these vined things. And then the other photo, why is it not coming up? This one, movable but raised garden beds. So and these are not very wide. So say for instance, you are in a chair, like a wheelchair, manual chair, or you need to sit down. There's actually a chair over here in the corner, and these are the benches I mentioned. So you can actually sit down and reach over. The reach is wide enough for you to reach halfway through the garden bed, pick plants, whatever you need to do. And again, they can be moved if they're in a position, like they can be spaced out so that people in wheelchairs can navigate through them. You can't see my hand motion, but so that people with wheelchairs can navigate through them. Or if you just need to sit down, while you're planting or things like that. Here, there's a table back here as well for if you want to make small garden pots and then transfer them there. But that was another thing I want to show you. So when you're thinking about this, perhaps this is a design you want to implement. I know one garden I had gone to, they bought these and then they modified them for a member that needed them to be modified. And this is actually from Home Depot. It has lasted a number of Chicago winters. So I wanted to show that to y'all. Yeah, so there was an ADA. Yeah, the ADA 25. Was I here? I want to say I was here when they did the 25th. I don't remember if I was in Chicago or in Ohio. But that's one way. Like when you're creating these garden spaces, they don't necessarily have to be in the ground. Another friend in Michigan, she did one where the garden beds are just really tall and narrow. So they changed the dimensions of the garden bed, and people can navigate around them. There's concrete, so they can actually sit down while they garden and plant. Oh, the 8825 in Chicago. I mean, perhaps. Right now, I'm not taking on any more like community projects or partnerships because of the ones I'm currently working on. But thank you so much. This would be interesting to do a fellowship with, or I can just pass this on to other people that may or may not know about it. But yeah, so I wanted to show you, these are solutions that people have come up with. It's not an abstract idea. People actually, kind of saying, I want to make this a reality, and they are. And a lot of what I'm doing is documenting it or centering and furthering and really bringing about to the fore ideas that disabled people have been talking about for a long time. And I'm really grateful for all the people who've collaborated with me, both in Chicago and over the years, because they have really informed my work and my community support work. Any other questions or comments? I like comments too. Thank you again for your time. Oh, yes. This was Thank you. I'm really glad, like I said, I'm really glad that I was picked as a speaker, and I'm glad that I could bring this information to people. And I do believe, like I said, it's live now, but it's also going to be recorded and archived. So you can go back to stuff. I will be giving my PowerPoint over so that so that you can access the information. If you, for instance, if you don't live in Chicago and you want to create a similar guide, that was the point. The point is not to just have a guide for Chicago. The point is to have these guides in different cities to really facilitate change. Chicago is, the place where I was able to really talk to a lot of people and get it started once I really got the kind of general idea in my head. And a lot of disabled people have been supporting it. So I felt like with all of the community support, that this was actually the right way to go. Had disabled people said, no, not really, this isn't it, this isn't a problem, then it would have been, okay, well, it's not a problem. I can go to something else that is to help highlight. And that's another thing. Sometimes you will have disabled people who say, this isn't really something that works for me. Yes. So again, like I said, please, if you can implement this in other cities or you want this idea in other cities, that would be great. This is definitely for the people, and I want people to be able to try and implement a guide of some sort to facilitate change. It's not just for people to read, it's for people to do. There's an action behind it. It's, like I said, it's a work of justice, right? It's the journey, and then that destination is food sovereignty. Any other questions or comments?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So, Kristen, I'm on the west side of Chicago, and I'm starting a. Yeah, I'm in Humboldt Park, so I'm starting.
I'm in North Lawndale, so I'm like south of you.
Okay, so we're trying to start up with the churches mutual organization to essentially
You're cutting in
build
and out. I can't.
permaculture gardens for senior. Can
You're
you hear
cutting
me
in and
better
out, and I
now?
can't. Could you try again to say what you were saying? I'm so sorry.
How about now? Is this better?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay, so anyway, I'm trying to start up a company, an urban farm here on the west side in West Humboldt Park, where we're partnering with senior citizens community that they're like what you mentioned earlier, where like people are having troubles taking care of their properties and scooping the sidewalks and all that stuff. When that's a huge problem with the olding population out here on the west side. I mean, they just don't have the energy, the resources to maintain, living alone. So what we're trying to do is start up permaculture gardens in their backyards and front yards where we can help start with food sovereignty, but also address a lot of the neighborhood problems that you were talking about earlier. So that's what we're doing out here. And, we're networking with anybody and everybody. So I guess my point is if that sounds like, everyone we talk to, they're really interested, but we're trying to get everyone on board and get resources and stuff going so that one, we can apply for grants and stuff like that. So, but the one thing I wanted to mention was we wanted to set up a section of the garden where it is what would a urban garden look like that's handicap accessible. And I would love to get your input on some of the features that we should include in it so that one, it helps anyone and everyone, because we also want to have the sensory part of it too. One of my roommates he is visually impaired. So like these ideas of, sensory gardens and systems that he can access too. So if, he was living on his own, he knows where to go to in the kitchen gardens to get food and stuff like that. So.
Okay, so the first I would say with homes to make sure that you can grow in the front and backyards, because there are legal issues with that. In terms of snow removal, there's actually an organization called My Hood, My Block, My City. And in the winter, they have a program where they do help, scoop like snow and stuff from seniors' yards and streets. And so you could always contact them. Can you see the chat?
I was seeing the chat earlier.
Okay, I'm gonna type in what the name of the organization is that does the snow. They do the snow removal for seniors, so you can contact them to see how they set that up, because I know they ask for volunteers. I don't know if they provide the volunteers, rides, or maybe CTA passes. So there's that. I would say too, like I said, check zoning laws. Laws about
a lot of what we're doing. So I'm like a scavenger. I've been an artist for the last 5 years, and I've been networking with these businesses out in the suburbs. And I came across a produce company that has literally thousands of milk crates. So my mission is actually more to create mobile art or more mobile garden systems and like backyards that we can help actually make like their backyards more handicap accessible.
Well, I'm thinking, I mean, you could definitely do that, but I would say, do you remember the picture I showed with the ones you can, the garden beds you can build and kind of take down, the wooden ones?
Yeah, yep.
I would say use those because it can help with like the bending and kind of that kind of movement. And for your roommate, what would be a great thing is to dedicate each bed to something different and then have a map in Braille. So if you have the first bed, the first bed you come out from, that's tomatoes, right? Or something, or you can like grow small tomatoes. And the next one is, what did my friend have in the other thing he had in his bed? He had snap peas, like sugar peas, right? And then you have, and the beds can be different sizes depending on someone's need, right? So you can build them out bigger, smaller, but the narrow ones would be better for people who are seniors who need to reach. So longer, narrow beds are better. But for your friend, having just a map of what's in the garden, and having markers, because they have those markers you stick in the ground, having those in Braille. So if he wants to do stuff on the ground, Braille, and then he'd be able to identify each of the things more easily.
With those kinds of services, where would you go for that? And also is, where, it's West Humboldt Park. We don't have a lot of resources yet to do.
The thing is, some things are DIY. Like the beds, those are from Home Depot, but another
I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, you can just like slide them into place.
Yep.
Oh yeah, QR codes are really great too. There's actually a device, the My Pen, I believe it's called, where you can just print out and put a sticky label of something in Braille, and you can point the pen at it, and it'll read it to you and tell you what it says.
Oh, that's cool.
I believe I think it's called the My Pen.
Yeah, we're integrated that into the Humboldt Park with the talking statues and stuff program.
Yeah, so something like that would be great for the bed too. But yeah, so some things are DIY. The beds, you just kind of slide stuff into place, the ones from Home Depot. But there are some people who do build their own beds. I don't, right? I do. Building, but exactly. So you can build your own bed, or you can use those DIY ones from the kind of quick build ones from Home Depot.
Yeah, what we're doing is our neighborhood's starting to gentrify, so they're flipping properties. So we go to the construction crews and clean up their construction sites and take their scrap lumber from them to build our beds.
There you go.
So, yep. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and if you, I will put my email in the chat. So if you or anybody, oh no, that's not how I type it. Would like, and it's in the, like I said, it's in the presentation as well. But please, reach out to me if you have suggestions, if you want some advice, those kinds of things. I'm definitely on board for creating a more equitable, like, society, more equitable garden spaces, all of those things. Was there anyone else? Forget on comments. My family's watching this, so hey. Just wanted to say hi to them. And my best friend's watching too. Hey. Sorry, I'm extremely thirsty. Do I have? Yes, actually I do. I'm actually doing a talk with the Advocates for Urban Agriculture and the Garfield Park Conservatory this Wednesday, 6 to 7 p.m. as part of their what's it called, Second Tuesday series? I can't remember the name of the series. I have to look it up. So I actually am doing one more explicitly on garden spaces or community and public garden spaces. So yes, you can see me again. So yes, that one's 6 to 7 p.m. And that one is, partnership with AUA and the Garfield Park Conservatory. Yes, thank you. Yes, second Wednesday lecture. And there's me. Yes, that's me, Rashika Torres. So the talk will be slightly different. It will not be about the guide. It will actually be more toward, geared toward like gardening or open community spaces and parks. So really excited about that. That's about an hour. So yeah, like I said, 6 to 7. So you can meet me there, ask me questions. I don't think I have anything after that for a little while. I'm actually giving another talk, but not about this, to the American Medical Association. We're still working that out. And then there's a conference for the Association for the Study of Food and Society. So I will be talking about disability and food there. Not sure how open that one is. I think you may have to register and pay or something, but yeah, so those are the kind of talks I'll be giving in the coming months. But like I said, I'm so glad people came out and people are interested and people want to, I said, facilitate change. And that's kind of the point of, justice initiatives, to facilitate change, create a more equitable society, not just equal, but equitable. And yeah, so. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to thank you so much. This has been, I think this is like going to be one of those sessions that's going to be referred to several times on YouTube and used a lot and shared. And we're we can't wait for the guide to come out. But yeah, thank you, Megan, for pointing out the survey. Please be sure to fill out the survey for this session and for the summit in general. We might have some gifts, some t-shirts for folks. But that's still work in progress. We're hoping to do that and announce that tomorrow maybe. But yeah, I don't know if there's any other comments or questions. If not, yeah, just super thankful for this.
Thank you all so much for having me.
All right, y'all have a good rest of your day. Tomorrow we have the summit continues tomorrow. Please be sure to check out some flavor and reimagination sessions. There's still like yoga on demand. The DIY compost is also on demand, and check out the exhibit, the exhibitors and the exhibit hall. There's a lot of really cool information and videos there. But yeah, tomorrow, please join us. We have a few more sessions and the closing panel on mutual aid. So thank you all so much and have a good rest of your Friday.